ENT 110 students, hi, Catherine Robertson here. All right, so we are in week 5. Many of you have already logged on and have been working. You still have time for your week 4 discussion post. I did have a few of you reach out to me, which is great, and ask questions regarding your interview. And so hopefully I answered some of those questions. It looks like most of you were able to turn your midterm in on time. I'm working through grading those. Hopefully by the first part of next week, I will have each one of those graded and up for you. I'm just recapping 4. So the discussion post from week 4, as you looked for an individual and post what you could find out about them, just so that we have some like real world activity coming in and some things, other things for students to look at in this course. And so the week 4 homework, which was chapter 8, I think I had that due on the 16th. So if for some reason you didn't get that in as soon as possible so you can get some points on the board there. And week 5. So week 5, I did post the discussion 3, even though it is not technically due until it's 2 weeks. So you have 2 weeks to work on discussion number 3, which is based on discussion number 2. And basically your short reflection of reflecting on one of the interviews done in the discussion post 2. So pick one of them. Again, this is a few sentences regarding your thoughts and reflection on as to what the entrepreneur that was interviewed, what you could take away from that interview that another student had and comment. And just be respectful and inclusive in your language, in your response. Maybe you like what the entrepreneur has done. Maybe you have a critique of it. Either way, try to keep it upbeat and positive. This week, for week 5, there is a short video, How to Create a Company, Elon Musk's 5 Rules, which is a quite engaging video. There are 2 chapters we're going to be working on relative to PowerPoint. But there's the discussion post that is technically due this week, which is due next Monday, is that discussion post 2. It had a 2-week time period on, so that is the discussion post due for the end of this week. And even though I put the assignment in for discussion post 3. And so looking quickly at chapter 9 this week, because you have a homework assignment that is from both assignments. If for some reason when you click on the PowerPoint, again, it doesn't open correctly, make sure you look, when you're looking at your computer screen, you look to the right of whatever PowerPoint you're trying to open, and there are 3 little dots. If you click on those, you should have an option to edit, delete, or download. And oftentimes things just don't load correctly. And so what you have to do is just hit download, and then from your downloads, you can open those chapters, chapter 9 and then chapter 10. The homework assignment for chapters 9 and 10 is also posted. And chapter 9 starts to talk a little bit about entrepreneurial finance and accounting. And there are 4 sections in chapter 9, overview of entrepreneurial finance and accounting strategies, some 9.2 special funding strategies, accounting basics for entrepreneurs. If some of you have had the Accounting 111 course here or previous accounting experience, there are some similarities. Accounting basics for entrepreneurs and developing startup financial statements and projections. So one of the things that some of you that have watched Shark Tank, you may have seen individuals come in and they start to talk about where they have come or their journey in their to kind of realize their entrepreneurial dream. So how much money did they start with? What has been their working capital, and what have they earned so far? And then what are their goals or projections for the next 6 months, the next year, the next 5 years, in the direction that they would like the company, best case scenario, to grow. All right, so when we're looking at these 4 sections, there is a cute pictorial. I call it cute because it's a little backpack in figure 9.1, and it starts to talk about, the pictorial of this backpack shows us in a convenient way all of the different components that add value from an advertising standpoint to the book bag. And if you purchase a book bag, these are the areas that might be important to you. And so thinking about financing and how much you are going to put into the business of your own money and how much you are going to then finance the business is an important component if you are thinking about starting your own business. So there are a few typical strategies in figure 9.2 and slide 5, you will see there is a picture of 3 seedlings, a seed, early, and mature growth. So looking at, depending on the timing of your business, and if it is something that has just, kind of an idea and getting off the ground, and you are in the seed phase, you might just need small investments, and you might be able to use friends and family, or maybe a mentor to help you get off the ground. As you move in and start to grow, you might want to look for professional venture capitalists, private equity firms that maybe even some banking at this point that help you kind of move your business in the right direction and add some cash flow to your business. And then as the business grows, hopefully you have a self-sustaining model that is able to then, keep the business perpetuating. And also then the option, once the business starts to grow, that you might want to go into the public realm. Okay, so looking at a few other parts of this chapter, we look at some ideas of how companies might move forward, and then the examples of those companies. So, for instance, there is an example of a mission that is a charitable mission that is advancing education. And one of the examples, which many of you might know, is something called Khan Academy. And Khan Academy offers a wealth of information. It's free to the public, free to schools through sponsorships and grants that, for instance, I can tell you or send you a link to a specific topic, maybe relating to microeconomics. And there is a 3 to 5 minute video and maybe a series of videos that are presented that are, in my opinion, great videos. The Khan Academy is used in K through 12, and I've seen it used all the way through folks in their doctoral studies. There are some really great videos. Certain areas or certain disciplines, there are even there are more videos than you could even imagine. So depending on what your learning strategy is, what you are maybe lacking and in your understanding, you can find a lot of that at the Khan Academy. So again, their mission is a charitable one, advanced education, and an example of that would be Khan Academy. If you skip ahead to slide 13, you will see entrepreneurs can explore a variety of no loan funding options. And so there are some things relating to like crowdfunding and sometimes relating to bartering. I will do some free things for different businesses. In turn, they will use some of my products and promote some of my products. And so thinking about, in pre-orders, people will send in money ahead of time to help get some working capital going within the business. Looking at 9.3 and relating to accounting basics, again, we're going to be looking at what are our revenues, what are our revenue streams, how do we get revenue? What are some of our expenses? And let's be fairly comprehensive about those. And so then ultimately, what is going to be our income? Initially, it will probably be slim to none. And then as you grow, making plans to ensure that your revenue outweighs your expenses is a key element to the success of your business. And those of you that have had accounting at all will see something very familiar here in slide 18, the idea that assets equals liabilities plus equity. And this is true whether it's an individual and they are buying a home or you are a publicly traded company. The assets are things that are owned by the business. And that includes cash, that includes accounts receivable, that includes land and buildings, anything along those lines that would be considered an asset the business owns. Liabilities, on the other hand, are something that somebody else owns, maybe a bank, like a notes payable, or any type of payable that you might have. And the equity then is what the owner has in the business, that technically the owner could pull out of the business, or in the case of a publicly traded company, a shareholder or shareholders could pull out of the business. And so in figure 9.7, in slide 18, we see that you have the assets, the things that the business owns, and then what is the ownership? Is it somebody else or the business? And so thinking about this idea of adding the equity and the liability, it has to equal the assets. So for instance, if a business has $100,000 in assets, cash, a small building, a small car, inventory, and it all equals $100,000. So who owns it? If the bank owns $20,000 of the building, And that is the only payable or loan that we have. So we have the building, we have all of the assets that equal $100,000. We have a liability of $20,000, meaning a loan, and then whatever is left, pretty much, is the equity that is in the business. So that would be $80,000 because the equity plus the liability, things other people own, the 80 plus the 20 has to equal the $100,000 worth of assets that are under the umbrella of the business. And so there are a few examples here in the next couple slides as to how when you see movement relative to the assets going up and down and the structure of how that might look relative to liabilities and equity. Moving forward into slide 24, you will see something called a balance sheet. Some of you have seen this before in other courses where you will see the listing of those items, the assets, liabilities, and equity, listed out in numerical form. And then another statement that is very common is the income statement. So we typically have three statements. We have statement of equity. Income statement really comes first in our calculations. This is our revenue and expenses and a list of those items. And then our second sheet typically is our statement of equity, taking that net income and adding it to whatever it is we already have in the business from an equity standpoint, whether it is an individual or shareholder groupings. And then once we have that new total number of equity, we take that and we move it into something called a balance sheet, which was the first sheet that I showed you. A few more examples of how the accounting equation looks when we add and subtract things into each column. Again, when you are looking at entrepreneurial finance as a course, or you are looking at Accounting 111, or even then when we are able to get a few more accounting classes on the books, meaning assets, meaning financial accounting and managerial accounting, you will look at these and use a computer and some programming to calculate more things relating to assets, liabilities, and equity in the accounting equation. QuickBooks also does a nice job of highlighting these areas and kind of doing a lot of the work for you. The one other sheet that is typically seen is this idea of statement of cash flows. How are we getting money coming and going? And so, it gives us a better picture of where we might be bleeding money out and where our largest portion of revenue starts to come in. Okay, that is chapter 9. I'm going to pause there for just a second. Okay, looking at chapter 10, which is another area that is important this term or this week 5 of the course. In chapter 10, this is launching for growth, from launch for growth to success. And so there are a few things here, and this is where the Elon Musk video kind of comes into play, and thinking about how are we going to get this off the ground and what might be some of the items that we have of interest. And so thinking about how we are going to develop a framework, really, and some ideas as to things that you might be interested in and are already in your life that you could turn into a business idea. So for instance, thinking about, pick a topic that interests you and write a few things about or a summary of that concept. So in this week, starting next week, we are going to be looking at a business idea for you. And so really this chapter starts to kind of play into that. Some of the business ideas that you maybe have been bouncing around, some of you may have more than others, go ahead and think about how you might grow one of those business ventures. So there are some examples here, thinking about, how you would take an idea and either zoom in or zoom out, maybe work on a particular customer segment, and then what platform you might want to use to launch your product. All right, so take a few minutes to review chapter 10, looking at, are you ready? Proactively considering failure. How do you avoid trying to take an idea and move it forward, and at the same time avoiding some of the pitfalls that could slow you down? And so brainstorming about those ideas, also looking at a few examples here from chapter 10. And really, when we're considering moving into the entrepreneurial space, think about, as you're moving forward, some of the pros and cons of business ownership, really before you launch that business. And so there are some graphs here showing how quickly businesses kind of get off the ground and which direction they like to go. And there's a framework here for a lean planning cycle as to, how you might make a plan, run with it, review and revise. This cycle for small businesses where you are constantly kind of honing what might be the best practice for your business. And how would you develop a lean plan? So there are some examples here about developing a business plan or a lean plan. Again, this is not the business plan development course. We are really coming up with a basic outline, which I will have in another video talking about how you will outline an idea for yourself, which will be the basis of our final project and also of our final post. So go through and review some of the items in Chapter 10. I will circle back around with you later in the week to make sure everybody is moving forward. One additional item is that I did open up week 6 and 7 materials. You will see there, and actually you can see 8, but there's nothing really in there other than where you could post the discussion. But I opened those up for transparency, and for some of you that maybe want to work ahead a little bit, you can look at some of those items. I will continue to post videos relative to the assignments for those weeks. But if you are interested in working ahead at this point at all, which I don't necessarily recommend, but you at least have an idea of the workload that is left for you for the 8-week term. As always, if you have questions or concern, reach out to me via text 814-490-6473 or reach out to me via email crobertson@ec3pa.org. And have a wonderful evening, and I will get back at you shortly.